When a family keeps a milk cow, that cow gives far, far more milk than the family could ever drink fresh. Gallons and gallons of it, day after day. And in most modern homes, that surplus would simply spoil and be poured down the drain, wasted. But in an Amish home, not one single drop of that milk is ever wasted. Every bit of it becomes something: butter, cream, cheese, buttermilk, and a dozen other good things, right down to the last drop feeding the animals, so that nothing at all is lost. And today, I'm going to show you the whole beautiful old art of it, how a family turns a flood of milk into a whole pantry of good food and wastes nothing whatsoever. It's one of the most satisfying pieces of old home wisdom there is, so let me get right into it. Let me give you the heart of it first, the simple understanding the whole thing rests on, because it makes all the rest make sense. Fresh whole milk is really several good things gathered together in one, and the old art is the knowing of how to separate them out, each into its best use, so that the one flood of milk becomes many different foods. There's the rich cream that rises to the top. There's the milk beneath it, and within the milk are the parts that become cheese and the watery whey. And each of these, drawn out and used rightly, becomes its own good food. And even the leftovers of one become the makings of the next, right down to the very last, which feeds the animals. Nothing is a waste product. Everything is the raw material for the next good thing. That's the whole philosophy of it, and it's beautiful. So let me walk you through it, step by step, from the fresh milk all the way down to the last drop. It begins with the cream. When fresh, whole milk sits a while, the rich cream rises to the top, and you skim it off, and that cream is a treasure. Some of it is kept as cream itself, for the coffee, for the cooking, poured over the berries and the desserts, rich and wonderful. But the greater part of it becomes the queen of the whole dairy, the butter. You take that cream and you churn it, working it until, as if by magic, it turns, the fat gathering together into golden butter, while the liquid separates out. And there you have fresh, sweet, golden, homemade butter. One of the finest foods there is, made from nothing but the cream skimmed off your own milk. A family that keeps a cow makes its own butter this way, all it needs and more, and it is a world beyond anything from the store. But here's where the wisdom really begins. For the churning of butter leaves behind a liquid, and most folks today wouldn't know what it is or would throw it away. It's the buttermilk, the liquid left after the butter comes, and it is far from waste. It's a good, tangy, nourishing drink all on its own that folks have prized for generations. And it's one of the finest things there is for baking, giving a wonderful tenderness and tang to biscuits and pancakes and breads and cakes. So the very leftover of making the butter becomes another whole good food, the buttermilk for drinking and baking. You see how it goes? Nothing is lost. The making of one good thing gives you the makings of the next. Now let's go back to the milk itself, the milk beneath the cream, for it has its own uses. Much of it, of course, is simply drunk fresh and used in the cooking and the baking, poured on the porridge, the everyday milk of the household. But there's always more than can be drunk, and so we come to the next great transformation, the cheese. Milk becomes cheese, and this is one of the oldest and most wonderful ways of all to keep the goodness of milk. For cheese keeps far longer than milk ever could, turning a food that spoils in days into one that keeps for weeks, months, even years for the hard-aged cheeses. Making cheese is its own deep old art, the milk gently curdled so it separates into the solid curds and the liquid whey. The curds then pressed and salted and aged into cheese. From the soft, fresh cheeses eaten right away to the hard cheeses aged for months into something rich and keeping. The whole world of cheese is really just milk, transformed and preserved by old knowledge into a food that lasts. And so the surplus milk that would have spoiled becomes cheese that keeps and feeds the family long after. And here again, the making of the cheese leaves a leftover, the whey, that watery liquid drained off from the curds. And here again, it is not wasted. Whey is nourishing stuff, and the old folks used it in many ways, in baking and cooking, as a drink, and as one of the very best feeds there is for the animals, the pigs especially, who thrive on it. So even the leftover of the cheesemaking feeds the family or the livestock, nothing poured away. Now let me tell you about one more old way with milk that folks have entirely forgotten, and it's a clever one: the soured milk, or clabber. In the old days, when milk soured naturally, as raw milk does, folks didn't throw it out in a panic the way we would today. Naturally soured milk, clabbered milk, was a food in itself, used in baking where its tang and its acid did wonderful things for the bread and the cakes, used in old dishes, and used as the starting point for other things. The old folks understood the natural souring of milk not as spoilage to be feared, but as another useful transformation, another good use for milk that was past drinking fresh. So even milk that had soured had its place and its purpose, nothing wasted even then. And finally, the very last of it, whatever truly can't be used by the family, the last leavings, goes to the animals. And this is the final link in the chain that wastes nothing. The pigs, the chickens, the barn cats, the animals of the farm thrive on the leftover milk and whey and buttermilk and skimmings that the family can't use. So the milk that begins as the cow's gift comes full circle, feeding the family in a dozen forms and then feeding the very animals of the farm right down to the last drop. And truly nothing, nothing at all, is ever wasted. From the cow, to the cream and butter, to the buttermilk, to the milk and cheese, to the whey, to the soured milk, to the animals, every single bit of it turned to good use. That's the whole beautiful cycle. Let me walk you through the butter making a little more fully, because it's the heart of the dairy, and there's real satisfaction in understanding it. First comes the skimming. When the fresh milk sits in a cool place for a while, the cream, being lighter, rises up to the top and gathers there in a thick, rich layer, and you gently skim it off with a spoon or a skimmer into a separate crock. You gather this cream over a day or two, skimming each setting of milk until you have enough to churn. Then comes the churning itself. The cream goes into the churn and you work it. The old dash churn worked up and down, or the crank churn turned round and round, on, and it takes a good while and a good arm. And for a long time nothing seems to happen, just the sloshing of the cream. And then, quite suddenly, it turns, the fat all coming together into little grains, then into a soft mass of butter, while the liquid buttermilk separates out around it. You draw off the buttermilk, keeping it, of course, for it's precious in its own right. Then you work the butter, washing it in cool water and pressing it to work out the last of the liquid, and salting it a bit to help it keep, until you have a firm, golden, beautiful mass of fresh butter. It's honest work, and there's a deep satisfaction in that moment when the butter comes, and in setting out a fresh golden pound of it, made by your own hands, from your own cow's cream. And oh, the uses of that butter and cream through the household, for they're everywhere in the old kitchen. The butter on the fresh bread, in the baking, in the cooking, browning in the pan, melting over the vegetables, the rich foundation of so much good cooking. The cream in the coffee, whipped for the desserts, poured over the fruit and the puddings and the pies, stirred into the soups and sauces to make them rich. A family with its own cow lives rich in butter and cream in a way that store-bought folks can scarcely imagine, and it costs them nothing but the keeping of the cow and the work of their own hands. That richness, that abundance of good butter and cream is one of the great everyday luxuries of the old self-reliant life. Let me tell you more about the cheese, too, for it's the great keeper and worth understanding. The wonder of cheese is that it takes milk, which spoils in mere days, and turns it into a food that keeps for weeks, or months, or even years, concentrating all the goodness of the milk into a lasting form. The making of it begins by gently curdling the milk, so that it separates into the solid white curds and the watery whey. The curds are then gathered, and depending on what cheese you're after, they may be eaten fresh and soft right away, a simple fresh cheese, mild and lovely. Or they may be salted and pressed and set to age, growing firmer and sharper and more complex over the weeks and months into a hard-keeping cheese. A wheel of hard-aged cheese is a marvel of preservation, a great store of the milk's goodness, kept safe and good for a very long time, ready to feed the family long after the milk it was made from would have spoiled and been forgotten. The old folks made their cheese in the times of plenty, when the cow gave most, and kept it to eat in the lean times, another way of storing summer's abundance against winter's need. Now let me say a word about keeping all this cool. From the days before any icebox or refrigerator, the dairy work depended on having a cool place, and the old folks had clever ways. Many a farm had a spring house, a little stone building built right over a cool running spring, where the cold water kept the milk and butter and cream cool through even the hot summer. Others used the cool of the cellar or a cold well, lowering the milk and butter down to keep in the cool. The cool water of a spring or well was the old refrigeration, and it kept the dairy fresh and good with no power at all, just the natural cold of the earth and the water. So the whole dairy, the milk and cream and butter and cheese, was kept in these cool places, part of that same old wisdom of using the earth's own coolness to keep food, that we spoke of with the root cellar. It all fits together, you see, the whole old self-reliant way, each piece supporting the others. I remember butter-making day in the home of my youth, and what a good day it was. The cream gathered and ready, the churn brought out, and all of us taking our turns at the churning, for it was long work, and we shared it, the little ones churning a while till their arms tired, then passing it on. And the waiting, and the wondering, is it turning yet? And then that moment when it came, when someone called out that the butter had come, and there it was. And then the working of it, and the buttermilk saved for the biscuits, and at the end a whole crock of fresh golden butter, made by our own hands, that we'd eat all the week. There was such satisfaction in it, such a sense of having made something good and real together, and such richness in eating that fresh butter we'd made ourselves. It bound us together, the shared work of it, and it fed us well, and it taught us young that good food came from our own hands and our own care and our own good animals, not from a store. That's a knowing worth having and worth passing on, and it's a big part of why I share these old ways with you now. Now let me be the honest neighbor and give you a few plain and careful words, because milk is a food that must be handled with real care, and I'd never leave that out. Milk is a food that can spoil and can carry sickness if it's not handled cleanly and kept properly. So cleanliness and proper keeping are everything in dairy work. Everything must be kept scrupulously clean. The milking, the vessels, the hands, all of it. And the milk kept cool and handled right. And I must say a plain word about raw milk, the fresh, unpasteurized milk straight from the cow. For while it's traditional and many prize it, it can carry real risks of sickness, especially for the young, the old, the pregnant, and the frail. And this is a serious matter that folks should be genuinely informed about, and the laws about it differ from place to place. So if you're ever dealing with milk fresh from a cow, learn the proper safe handling of it thoroughly from good, trusted sources, understand the real risks, and make an informed and careful choice. And the cheese making and butter making, done for keeping, must be done properly and cleanly by good methods to be safe. So as with all the old food ways, this is knowledge to be learned properly and practiced carefully, not carelessly. The old folks did it with great care and cleanliness, and so must anyone who takes it up. With all those honest cautions given, let me tell you why I find this old art so beautiful. So much more than just a way to use up extra milk. Because it's the whole spirit of the old way, made plain and visible, the spirit of wasting nothing, of honoring every gift, of using a thing completely and turning even its leftovers to good. Think of the mind behind it. Nothing is thrown away as waste. The leftover of the butter becomes the buttermilk. The leftover of the cheese becomes food for the pigs. The soured milk becomes the tang in the bread. Every single part is honored and used, right down to the last drop. That's a way of thinking, a way of living, that the modern world of waste and disposal and throwing away has entirely lost. We waste so much now, pour so much away, throw out so much good without a thought. But the old way honored what it was given, used it fully, wasted nothing, and there's a deep rightness and a deep respect in that. A gratitude for the gift and a refusal to squander it, and there's such a satisfaction in it besides, in the transforming of one thing into many, in the skill of it. To take the cow's flood of milk and, with your own hands and old knowledge, turn it into golden butter, tangy buttermilk, keeping cheese, rich cream, all of it, feeding your family through the year from that daily gift, wasting not a drop, is a deeply satisfying thing, a real mastery, a real provision. The family that can do this is a family that turns one cow into a whole dairy, a whole pantry of good food, through nothing but skill and care and the refusal to waste. That's the old self-reliance again, the capable hands and the good knowledge making abundance from what they're given. And there are yet more good things milk becomes that I'd not want to leave out, for the old dairy was endlessly inventive. There are the cultured, soured milks made on purpose, thickened and tangy and good, that folks have made and prized across many lands, gently soured into something wholesome and keeping better than fresh milk. There's the soft, fresh cheese, the cottage cheese, made simply from the curds, mild and good. There's the rich, soft cheese made from cream, and in the cold of winter, with snow and ice at hand, there was even the making of frozen creams, a rare, sweet treat churned in the cold. The point is, milk is one of the most generous and versatile foods there is, and the old folks knew a dozen ways to turn it into good-keeping food, so that a single cow's daily gift became butter and cream and cheese and buttermilk and cultured milk and soft cheese and all the rest, a whole varied larder from one animal, and not a drop of it wasted. That inventiveness, that knowing of so many ways to use and keep the milk, is exactly what let a family turn a flood of milk into abundance rather than waste. And it's worth asking, as always, how we came to forget all this, to the point where most folks now would pour surplus milk down the drain without a thought. And the answer is the same as ever. The store came, selling butter and cheese and every dairy thing ready-made and cheap, and the family cow went away, and with it the whole art and the whole need. Why churn butter when you can buy it? Why make cheese when it's on the shelf? And so, one generation to the next, the old dairy arts were forgotten, the churns put away in attics, the spring houses fallen to ruin, until now hardly anyone knows how to turn cream into butter or milk into cheese. But the knowledge was never lost, only set aside, and the arts are all still there, still exactly as they were, waiting for anyone who keeps a cow or a goat, or who simply wishes to learn the old ways, to pick them back up. And the spirit behind them, the wasting of nothing, needs no cow at all, and can be taken up by anyone, anywhere, today. So here's what I'd leave you with. Even if you never keep a cow or churn a pound of butter, I want you to carry away the spirit of this old art, for it's a spirit worth having in any life. The spirit of wasting nothing, of using what you have fully and completely, of honoring your food and your resources and turning even the leftovers to good rather than throwing them away, of that deep gratitude and respect that refuses to squander a gift. Look at your own home, your own kitchen, your own life, and ask where you're pouring good things down the drain, throwing good things away, wasting what could be used. And take up, in your own way, that old spirit of wasting nothing, of using all the way down to the last drop. It will save you money, and more than that, it will connect you to a wiser, more grateful, more careful way of living that our ancestors knew and that we've so sadly lost. And should you ever wish to go further, to keep a cow or a goat, to learn the old arts of butter and cheese and all the rest, that whole beautiful world of turning milk into abundance is there to be learned, properly and carefully, one of the most rewarding and self-reliant of all the old skills. But learn it well and handle it safely and honor the care it requires. If this is the kind of practical, grateful old wisdom you've been hungry for, the kind that wastes nothing and connects you back to the good sense of those who came before, then stay here with me. There's so much more where this came from, and I aim to bring it back to you, one piece at a time. Subscribe, and we'll keep remembering the old ways together, because some of the most valuable things we ever knew are the simple ones we let ourselves forget. And the old spirit of wasting nothing, of honoring every gift right down to the last drop, is surely one of the most precious of them all.